What's going on, guys? It's Minh with What's a Mortgage. Tonight is a legendary night because tonight ends our twice a week Facebook Live. I know. Some of you guys, what? Why? Are we being canceled? No! The reason why is because it's time for me to take some steps back and put more of myself into you. What does that mean? That means we'll be going live once a week. We were going to do Wednesdays, but I think Monday night was better. So we're going to be going live Monday nights at 9 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. I think we're going to try to do Instagram as well. If not, we're going to do Instagram on Tuesdays. But we're trying to do Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 8 to 10 p.m. I will spend more time with you guys on phone calls. I am getting a lot of requests that consumers want to talk to me directly, right? And they want to hear from me directly. I also want to hear from you too. I want to know your concerns, your challenges, your trials and errors through the home buying process, right? So from Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, I will be answering all the phone calls coming in from What's a Mortgage. During the daytime, I'm making content and there's not enough time in the day. So I decided that Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 8 to 10 p.m., I will be taking calls. All right, guys? So, guys, my name is Minh Win. Welcome to our live stream. If it's your first time tuning in, welcome. Just let you know, we will be going live Monday nights at 9 p.m. All right? So, don't forget, Monday night, 9 p.m. And tonight, we are going to talk about, you can't avoid it, your property taxes, right? So, when you buy a home, there will be property taxes. Tonight, we're going to go over what are property taxes, right? Where does your property tax money go? How to calculate property tax, and last but not least, your Impound account. All right, guys? So, guys, this is an interactive live stream. Do me a favor. If it's your first time tuning in, ask a lot of questions. Also, let us know where you're from. Also, do us a favor. It's your first time tuning in. And, guys, if I bring you any of you guys value tonight, do me a favor. Hit the like and hit the share button. All right, guys? What's going on, Dad? How you doing? What's going on, Nikki? What's up, Jamie? What's up, Freddie? How you doing, right? Before we get to Q&A, bring all the questions, let's talk about your property taxes, all right? So, Property Tax 101, this is a 3-part series. Part number 2 will be supplemental taxes, and part number 3 will be how to avoid your property from getting reassessed and bringing up your property taxes, right? The American dream is to own a home, but there will be property taxes. Yes, there is shade out there. Well, you don't really own your home because you got to pay taxes. When you rent and you pay your rent, your landlord has to pay property taxes. So you cannot avoid property taxes. But I would rather pay my property taxes than rent for the rest of my life. I'm going to show you in a second, all right, guys? So, guys, let's get into it, okay? So, Property Tax 101, this is a 3-part series. If you are considering being a homeowner, or if you already are a homeowner, this is very muy importante information, all right? Let's get into it, okay, guys? So, first of all, what are property taxes, right? Property taxes is a tax paid on a property owned by an individual or other legal entities like a corporation, right? Okay, property taxes are imposed by the government to generate money for public purpose. So, if you plan on living in America, right, you will be paying property taxes. If you own commercial, you will pay property taxes. If you own units, you will pay property taxes. If you rent, don't think you're not paying property taxes. You're paying rent to the landlord, and the landlord's paying property taxes. So, you got to deal with it, right? But remember, property taxes don't increase unless you do something, right? And we're going to go about that in part number 3. So definitely, you got to watch all the parts if you want to know how to minimize your risk when it comes to property taxes, all right? So that's what property taxes are. Where does the money go, right? All revenues from property taxes is allocated to local government. Property tax revenue remains within the county in which it is collected and is used exclusively by local government, right? School systems, schools, right? Education system, right? Fire department, police department, recreational parks, hospitals, sanitation. That's where your money is going. That's where your rent is going, okay? So I know people do it all the time. I wouldn't do it because I got mad respect for the blue, right? Mad respect for police. When a cop pulls you over, don't go, I pay for your salary. But technically, that's where your property tax is going. But I would not say that to any of them, right? Because they protect us, all right, fam? So that's where your money is going. If you're trying to wonder where your money is going, that's where it's going, okay? So typically, when homes go up in value fast, areas where home increases in value fast, they don't raise property taxes or change the tax rate often, okay? So if you're in California, typically it's not going to happen. But if you're in an area that doesn't grow in equity fast, right? It's not bringing up value, but cost keeps going up because of inflation. That's when they start raising your property tax rate or your property tax for reassessment. Every state is different, right? Every state has their own laws and rules. In California, we have our own laws and rules as well, right? So most of our tax rules right now are for nationwide, but there's specific rules that are only for California because I'm from California, okay? So that's where your money is going. So be at rest knowing that, you know what, the police is there for you, the fire department is there for you, right? Hospitals, recreational parks, right? Schools are there for you, sanitation is there for you because of your tax dollar, right? There is taxation when there is representation, all right, guys? So that's where your money's going. Here, right? So this is the rant. Oh my gosh, I'm so tired of hearing this. And here's my proof in the pudding, right? So there's a property right now being sold for $499, right? In Fontana, 15581. I just pulled it up on August 20th, right? 2020, or no, August 19th, 2020, right? That was today. It's being sold for $499. Right now, the property tax monthly for it, right, is $415 a month. Yes, there is the principal and interest and mortgage insurance you got to pay too. But after 30 years, but before we get, let me rewind a little bit, right? So that property, the tax is $415 a month. The rent for that house is $29.42. I pulled it up on Rent-O-Meter, and check this out. In 30 years, when your mortgage is paid off on that house, for all the hated rate people, you're going to pay taxes forever. You're never really going to own your home, right? I would rather pay in 30 years $415 a month in taxes compared to paying $7,141 a month in 30 years. With an inflation of 3% in rent a year, which is the yearly average. It is higher in California, but I'm giving you best case scenario, right? 3%. If you took $29.42 and inflated it by 3% every year for 30 years, you're going to pay $71.42 in rent if you want to rent that property still. Or you can own it, and after 30 years, you're going to pay $415 a month. Guys, that's what makes home ownership so special. Because eventually, it will come that time when you retire and relax. Think about this. 30 years from now, you think you can cover a $7,000 rent? But $415 is easy. That's why you see people who are retired, who own their home, that are surviving on Social Security and their pension because they bought their home years and years ago and they're paying that cheap property tax, right? Because of that, that's why they have financial wealth and freedom. Because they bought their home and they locked in the cost of property taxes, right? So that's why for all those people out there, it's better to buy than to rent. For all those, save and pay cash. By the time you can save it, the property taxes are going up. All right, guys? Lock in that property tax. Here we go. Next one, right? Well, what's the cost of property tax, right? How much are property taxes, right? Your taxes go to the county you're in, but property taxes may vary widely from city to city. So you got to look up the city that you're trying to buy in. Don't look it up by county. So it's not by county you are buying the house. It's by city. So if you decided where you wanted to live, you can look up in the local tax assessor and see how much property tax rate is in that city, right? You go to municipality websites, right? And you can look it up. Or talk to your realtor. You are making a payment once a month, or it's impounded through your bank account, right? Or through your mortgage payment. You should know what your property tax rate are, right? Because that can change where you want to buy. People say it's great to live in Texas. In Texas, right? even though they don't have state taxes, they have huge they have huge property taxes rate, right? So think about that. So think about, decide where you want to live, wherever you are. Look at the tax rate. Understand the tax rate. If you know the tax rate, you can calculate your property taxes. Why are mortgage calculators so wrong? Because they don't have your local tax rate. So definitely look it up. You can look it up. Look up the city, Fullerton tax rate, Fontana tax rate. But if you can't, this is industry standard here for you, okay? So it's the purchase price times the tax rate. That's how you figure out your property taxes. And then if you want to know the monthly, you divide it by 12. I just showed an example of 1 1/4. Why did I show an example of 1 1/4? Nationwide, when they're trying to figure out your property taxes, they times it by 1 1/4 when you don't know the tax rate, right? So definitely, if you're buying a house, sometimes, oh my God, why did my lender messed up? Why is my payment higher? You find out your payment's higher 2 months later, right? The lender did it on 1 1/4, but the actual tax rate, let's say, is 2%. Typically, tax rates are going to be under 1 1/4, but like I said, it all depends on the area. For example, if you're going to Compton or Norco right now, the tax rate is insane, okay? So think about that. So it all depends on the city, not the county that you're buying in. I recommend you look it up. If you don't have time to look it up, make your lender look it up. They're getting paid a commission. Make your realtor look it up. They're getting paid a commission. You should know. So when you use a mortgage calculator, hey, Mr. Lender, Mr. Realtor, what's my tax rate? Because I'm checking my mortgage payment. I don't want to overpay unless you're going to make my mortgage payment, Mr. Lender or Mr. Realtor. Guess what? Get to work. Give me that tax rate. All right? So typically it's the purchase price times the tax rate. Right here, we're doing an example of 1 1/4. That's $5,000, right? On $400,000. That's divided by 12. That's $416 a month on a $400,000 purchase, right? So I did this for you guys. You know, always looking out for you, right? Purchase price. If you're trying to figure it out, you got a mortgage calculator right now and you want to figure out what your tax rate is when you're figuring out your principal and interest, tax and insurance, right? So just know here on 300,000 at 1 1/4, 350, 400, 450, 500, up to 700,000. Do me a favor, fam. If you want to get these slides, it's going to be on our whatsamortgage.com blog. I think it should be up today or tomorrow. If it's not today, it should be up tomorrow. If you want to see that so you can figure out your tax rate, or just use the numbers I give you so you can figure out what's your mortgage payment, right? Because when you use a mortgage calculator, the principal and interest pretty much is always right. Your taxes, 90% of the time is going to be wrong. Your MI, 90% is going to be wrong. Your hazard insurance, 90% is going to be wrong, right? That's why you watch What's a Mortgage, right? We have a video on how to calculate your mortgage payment. Definitely watch, especially watch the portion about how to calculate your private mortgage insurance, right? That's really going to give you an accurate number. Why do we want an accurate number? Because we're the ones making the payment. If you're making the payment, you want a very accurate number, right? You don't want like, oh, well, it might be off by $100 too. $200 is a big deal, right? I got my Netflix. I just got my free subscription to Disney just ended. So now I got to pay like, I think $24.99. I got Disney with Hulu, and I think ESPN or something like that. I forgot what it was, right? So, but yeah, $200 is a big deal. Make sure you have the right information to calculate your property taxes, all right? So here's an example here, okay? This one right here, I actually looked it up. I put the link on the bottom, right? This is in the city of Fontana. 15581 Allison Way, Fontana, California, right? The purchase price is $499. The tax rate in Fontana is 1%, right? That means that's $4,990. That's $450 a month. And you know, I left the link below where I looked up the property taxes are. If you're working with a lender and they can't even help you pull up the property taxes, bye, Felicia, right? They should be concerned about your mortgage payment as they're concerned about their mortgage payment, right? They should be just crunching numbers, assuming, right? If you want accuracy, make sure you're working with a lender that cares, right? Work with someone that really knows and cares about your monthly mortgage payment. Even though they're not making the payment, you want to work with someone who cares, all right? Be a Care Bear and share, right? So here we go. Now let's talk about when taxes are due, right? Let's decide that, right? So here's I got so confused on this. Literally, I spent like almost half the day yesterday to get this information right for you, right? So property taxes are in 2020 are taxes are due, right? So they're due every fiscal year. So the fiscal year starts July. So in 2020, if taxes are due July 1st, 2019, and it ends June 30th, 2020, right? So for 2021, it would be July 1st, 2020 till June 30th, 2021, right? In the fiscal year, it starts July and it ends in June. It doesn't start January at the end of the year, right? So when they're collecting for your taxes, they're collecting from June to December, which is your first installment, and then January to June, which is your second installment, okay? So you know that when they're collecting property taxes, they're collecting for your fiscal year, okay? When they're collecting it in November, they're collecting it in the rears a little bit. When they're collecting it in February, late in April, they're collecting for the forward, okay? So know that when they're collecting your property taxes, just know they're collecting it twice a year for that fiscal year. Hopefully this makes sense, right? It took me a while to get this down, but now I get it. So it's still 12 months, so no one's squeezing any extra money out of you. It just goes from July till June instead of January till December, right? The midpoint, though, is December 31st. That will be your first 6 months, okay? So how are property taxes paid? They're paid twice a year, right? They pay them in November 1st, which is late December 10th. And that payment is for, remember, the first installment. It's July 1st to December 31st. The payment is due in November. So they are paying backwards a little bit. Remember that. The second installment is due in February, which is late after April 10th, which is paying forward from January 1st till June 31st, right? So yes, it does get confusing. You might want to watch this again, but just know that when you make your payment, your taxes are covered, fam, if it's impounded. That's why sometimes it's good to have an impounded account. Just know that you're not waiting for that huge bill that pops up twice a year, right? Once in November and once in February, right? We want to make sure, unless you're self-employed or unless you have that type of loot sitting around, you might want impounds for that reason where it can get confusing, okay? So, what is an impound account? So, an impound account, or AKA they call it an escrow account, is a piggy bank. When you make your mortgage payment, right? That they collect your property taxes and they collect your hazard insurance. When you buy a home, they make you pay your hazard insurance up front for a year. And then they collect months, right? And then when when the year is almost up, they pay, right? They pay your hazard insurance, right? Property taxes, no one can afford to pay a year up front. That's expensive. So they collect it in 2 installments, right? So depending on when your loan funds, they have to collect impounds. And then every month they collect a month to pay it in November and to pay it in February. But they impound your account to make sure that you do not miss your tax payment. Because if you miss your tax payment, guess what? There's going to be a tax lien. And when there's a tax lien, the bank gets paid second. Taxes will always be in first lien. So that's why, right, the banks do highly recommend a impound account so there's no property tax lien on the property. Because God forbid you foreclose or something happens, right, the property tax people get the money first. But if your account was impounded, they know to always pay your property taxes. So they know they're always in first position, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. So, are impounds mandatory? Well, when I buy a house, that's too much to collect for impound. I'll just pay it twice a year, right? It's going to be the same thing anyways. If you go FHA, you go VA, you go USDA, impounds are mandatory, okay? They are mandatory. They're going to collect each month, right? And they have to. But if you go conventional, nationwide, if you put 20% down, you do not have to have impounds. Why is that? Because you have 20% equity, right? God forbid something happens. The lien, there is enough because you have equity to pay the lien and pay the lender. But in California, if you put 10.01% down, you don't have to have impounds. Why is that? Because the values in California go up like crazy and it goes up fast. In other states, it might not, but in California, it does. That's the reason why California has a different rule. So if you're buying a house, just know that you will be paying impounds, all right? So I think if you understand that, you'll accept it and move on. Also, guys, when you are doing a refinance, when you have that impound account, right? If you're getting close to November or close to February, March, right? And your impounds haven't been paid, they're going to ask you to pay it, and that on your mortgage statement, that impound check comes back to you because it was already paid because your current lender hasn't paid it yet. When you refinance, your new lender requires you to pay it, so there's no lien, right? And then your old lender will refund you the money, right? What's my refund going to be? Check out your mortgage statement, all right? Hopefully that helped you out there. Here is our impound tax schedule, right? Depending on when you fund, and then they collect your impound account, right? Here's a perfect example. Remember the home in Fontana? The taxes were $415. If you fund in March, they're going to collect $1,200, right? 3 months. If it funds in August, $3,200. So you can see here when you start funding in August, September, and October, it gets a little bit pricier. Well, I'm going to fund near the beginning of the month, beginning of the year, right? The house might not be there. Also, the earlier you fund the house, you're going to be paying, you're going to be collecting, when you make your mortgage payment, it collects the impound. It's the same thing. So just know when you buy a house and a lender sends you a loan estimate, this is where they get sneaky on you, right? They lower the impounds. It drops your APR. And some guys are, oh, this lender gave me, I'm going to shop the APR. You're crazy, man. You got to look at the APR. Well, depending on if they jack up the impounds or they lower the impounds, right? So it all depends on which lender you're working with. That's why you want to work with someone who's straight up. If they give you a property tax, right, for impound that's super low, and you look on the impound scale, you're like, if they're already fibbing about the impounds, what else are they fibbing about, right? Little lie turns into a big lie, right? So you want to make sure you take and this is brought to us by Charles Armijo at First American Title. Mad love for you, Charles. Guys, if you're a real estate agent or a lender, Charles delivers. Fam, I'm telling you, you don't know how much I rely on Charles to come through for me on a lot of stuff, especially when we get into supplemental taxes and we're getting into how to avoid your property taxes from going up by transferring title. You guys, if you're doing a lot of refinance right now, you need a guy like Charles on your side. Guys, if you know you're going to inherit a property from your parents or from your grandparents, you got to be messing with Charles. Why is that? He's going to help you avoid paying and getting your property reassessed on these higher taxes, right? That's why I love Charles, man. So Charles gave us this impound schedule. Definitely, it will be on our whatsamortgage.com. So when you get that loan estimate and you see they're collecting 3 months and you're in the month of August, you need to fire that loan officer. If they're fibbing about impounds, what else are they fibbing about? All right, guys? So that's it, guys. So that is part 1 of property taxes. Guys, if you don't know what property taxes are, hopefully now you know, right? And it's so important. When there's other steps after becoming a homeowner, and property taxes plays a big part in home ownership, right? Now when you pay your property taxes, now you have that, whoa, school system's covered, police, fire department, right? So just know libraries, right? So definitely, guys, understand that you owning a house is important, and the property taxes that you pay are important to keeping our local government around. All right, guys? Just know that it is important to know about it. The reason why, because it comes out of pocket. You should know where your money is going, okay? If you have more questions on part 1 of property taxes, definitely, guys, if you want these slides, they will be on whatsamortgage.com. And next week on Monday, 9 p.m., we will be going over part 2 and I think part 3 at the same time. Supplemental taxes and how to avoid your property taxes from raising, right?